obviously the second half of this 2025 FIA Formula 1 season has well and truly started, and one of the tracks that is definitely the driver's favorite. Everybody, welcome here to the Spa-Francorchamps, of course the proud host of that unlucky round 13 of the championship, the host of course the Belgian Grand Prix, and of course it is the sprint weekend, which means that we are having only our third ever sprint reaction, and again, 3 could be lucky or unlucky number, definitely for Scuderia Ferrari. I would say unlucky, quite unlucky, especially considering how the whole sprint went. So over here, obviously, who is leading that sprint table at the moment? Lewis Hamilton of Scuderia Ferrari, scoring the most points, obviously, in the first 2 sprint weekends, winning in China, being on the podium in Miami. So we were very excited, heading into the weekend, especially as we are having more upgrades after that welcome 2-week break, which is rather unusual. And of course, we were expecting a really strong performance, which I have to say it wasn't that bad. But in this exclusive sprint reaction, we will tell you everything about that portion, obviously, of the Belgian Grand Prix, which is the sprint. The third sprint of the season, and what we should have done to be celebrating over here with the trophy and to the beautiful tune, obviously, of the Italian anthem. Because I do believe that victory, maybe even the 1-2, was definitely possible. So normally you would be greeted, and of course I know it because I spent my high school years very nearby this amazing track. That's a really great pleasure to drive. Definitely do check out my Red Hat Lab for the proof of that. Normally you are greeted usually with clouds, maybe the persistent rain and so on, but so far it wasn't the case this weekend, right? So, pretty much a nice summer weather, quite warm, 25 degrees Celsius, for Belgium, that's really warm, to be perfectly honest with you, and, having, a bit of a blue sky, and having dry conditions, really, makes it enjoyable, but rather unusual, right? It will make the races faster, but rather not what you would expect over here. And of course, we knew that, the fact that, now we are starting the 13th Grand Prix, the fact that actually, there will be 4 sprint weekends in the second half of the season means that there's everything to play for, right? So, we start from 5th and 6th in the Drivers' Championship, which, by the way, we will show you after we tell you how the whole sprint finished, and of course, 2nd in the Constructors, as we aim to go 1 better than we did last year or in 2022 to again, get very close to 20 Constructors titles, in the history of Formula 1, the most of any Constructors. Over here, I have to say, I managed to do really well in Belgium over the years, and for the sprint I really did expect that we will do better, and in the sprint qualifying one, the SQ1, it's really where it came undone. So you are having a limited tire allocation, right? So you have a medium soft. So for the SQ1, sprint qualifying 1, we of course had, the medium tires, and, the Lewis Hamilton, obviously, who is racing for Scuderia Ferrari, our new driver, he got caught out in a bit of a mess caused by the driver who replaced him, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who went a bit wide in stubble, which I can kind of understand, but, he actually, didn't just go wide, he spun right, broke out of the gravel, on a track, and his teammate Russell, who was going behind him, and Hamilton were definitely compromised. So as a result, they didn't set really competitive time. So Hamilton had to go again. Leclerc was through to the SQ2 sprint qualifying 2. And then, of course, what happened was, that Lewis, was doing well, but it was kind of on the cusp, right? Not really improving because, you only have that set of tires, right? So you cannot go to the new set of the medium tires. That's very important to remember. So as he went with the SF1000T and running Formula 1 Racing Simulator that you can see here, obviously to my left, he spun going into the bus chicane, and you could feel, it was terrible because at that moment he immediately knew he would, be out of, the qualifying 18th. Yeah, that's one of the worst positions that you can start for in the Scarlet Red Ferrari, and yeah, it's really weird because of course you have to be a little bit careful braking into that bus stop chicane, right? You gotta hit the brakes relatively hard, but then kind of let go on them and go progressively, through, the gears, which clearly, he maybe went just a bit too fast, which is so the rear would simply lock up. I do understand because, you can gain a 10 or 2 and he maybe really needed that, even though if he just went, a bit conservative, through the bus stop chicane, I believe he would have made it, and he would have been through to the sprint qualifying too. And that was very important because obviously with Antonelli getting kicked out, Russell also getting kicked out in his SQ2 sprint qualifying too, along with Tsunoda, they were really only out of the top 4 teams, the top 4, only 4 drivers, right? So the 2 McLarens, Verstappen and Leclerc. So you were kind of almost guaranteed to be starting 5th, if he just, put in the laps that the car can do in the case of Lewis Hamilton. Thankfully, Leclerc did it, so he qualified 4th, 7/10, of that blistering, led by Piastri. So he's got his ass spanked, so to speak. Verstappen qualifying 2nd, that definitely, will make his wound, so to speak, even more painful. But yeah, then obviously for the start of the sprint race, so everybody was on the medium tires. I believe only Colapinto on the soft tires, which didn't work out for him because they would suffer from a lot of the tire degradation because the ambient temperatures and especially the track temperatures are quite high. So of course, as a result, when the track temperatures are close to 40 degrees Celsius, it won't be like the traditional one-stop race that you would expect. So even for a one-stop race, for example, you would go medium hard, right? So really going for medium tires for a sprint was the only option. And once the lights went out, it was kind of as we were. I expected that maybe there would be something going on into La Source, but the drivers nowadays, unlike in 1998, maybe you remember that biggest shot in the Formula 1 history, they were very well behaved. And yeah, basically, you had, Piastri leading from Verstappen, and crucially, he had a gap of about 4 tenths, and Norris was right on Verstappen's tail because obviously Verstappen was pushed away in the last source, and Leclerc was doing really well from the 4th position. Obviously just monitoring the situation and then, taking, I believe, the Eau Rouge pretty much flat out. And as a result, same went for the Red Bull driver who overtook Piastri on a camel straight, and so did Leclerc. So he was in front of Norris, and then I think, in the first 3 to 5 laps, Leclerc did very well to keep up, but again, in qualifying, if he would have put in a better lap, qualify 2nd, if Hamilton made it over there, that could have been, definitely, the recipe to the victory. Because if we were first, just like in China, for example, I do believe we could have held on to the lead because we had a pretty good, decent, the straight line speed, even though not as fast as the Red Bulls, but it was very clear, that despite the upgrades, we didn't really have the ultimate pace to keep up, especially with Verstappen and Piastri, and sadly, once Leclerc was unable, to keep up within a second of Piastri and lost the DRS, Norris then passed him, and the last pretty much 10 laps. So obviously Leclerc tried his best, but it was pretty much he was pretty much a spectator too. A really interesting fight, for the sprint victory. You could see Verstappen really getting close, even sometimes going a bit over the top, with the defense, weaving slightly just right to left on the camel straight to keep the position from Piastri. But overall, yeah, it was a nice pulsating sprint, but I believe with we say Hamilton only made it to 15, as you would expect it would be very difficult to make a bit more of a progress, because he basically got stuck in a DRS train. There are no pit stops, right? So it was critical to just plant it on a pole position. Maybe that was a bit out of the reach, but basically being 2nd or 3rd, which even maybe Hamilton could have had, because Hamilton went faster in free practice 1 than in sprint qualifying 1, then you would have a chance, especially with McLarens that were relatively slow on a straight, if you in front of them, they did struggle to overtake, because as we found out, obviously when we did the 2023 season, it's actually a great track, but a little bit more difficult. The overtaking spots are a little bit more difficult to come by, simply because it is so high speed, and even though the track is wide, you cannot go off the line, way too much. You would basically have to send it, trust the other guy. So as a result, basically that first position is very, very important, right? And clearly with McLaren's lack of the top speed, which was demonstrated when Leclerc just flew past Norris when he was just within a couple of tenths of him, really gave us clear indication that we could have won the race, especially with Leclerc, if he maybe started, one or two places, higher up. So a bit of a pity, but still, decent points for Charles, especially, given the fact that neither Mercedes finished in the top 10. So this is great for the constructors. And sadly, we wish that Lewis Hamilton, was there to pick up the pieces, because again, in the worst case, 5th place would have been easy, since you had guys like, as we will see now on the Scuderia Red Ratina Island, guys like Ocon or Sainz, Berman or Hajar, actually getting the points. So this is how the sprint then finished. So overall, yeah, a bit of an anticlimax, I have to say. And that's simply due to the fact that, it's just difficult to overtake, isn't it? So over here, let's take a look at it. Okay, I'll make sure so I can see it. I hope you guys can see it as well. So Max Verstappen winning over here. Obviously with the Red Bull, in the race introduction, the Horner second, the Red Bull, boss second hasn't happened yet. So it's quite interesting, that immediately you have this replacement, the former, the strategy guy at Scuderia Ferrari, Laurent Mekies, is now leading Red Bull, and now having the 100% record of winning, right? So winning on a debut thanks to Verstappen, who executed the race really well. He must be really pleased, about that. But again, it's kind of surprising what is happening at Red Bull. I wouldn't be surprised, if this would be kind of, their only victory for a while, because I think, the team is in shambles. But this is what happens when you have a lot of the power play, right, happening. And, you always have to make sure that, as we say, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, because this is what happened to Christian Horner, who now is not obviously the Red Bull boss anymore. So over here, Verstappen winning, and it's his 12th sprint victory. That's 10 more than the other guys who are the McLaren drivers. And surprisingly, Bottas, Leclerc has never won a sprint, for example. Can you believe it? So not a big surprise that Verstappen won it. Again, for the sprint standing, this will shake it up quite a lot, with Piastri just holding off Norris. That again, the championship pretty much stays as it does. Leclerc, we will see. I think for the Grand Prix, especially with mixed conditions, we will have a bit more of a chance, and we will definitely find a little bit more speed. And then you can see 5th, then finish Ocon for Haas, so that's a great result for them. So they pick up lots of points in that great battle in midfield. You don't know who will finish 5th or 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. Maybe you know that Alpine will probably stay 10th, but as we will show you in the standings, that's pretty impressive. So then you have Sainz, having starting that second half of the season very well with the 6th place. Berman 7 obviously did that great job in Saudi Arabia for Ferrari, and these are good points for him. 1/3 of the points that he's gotten in the first half of the season now in the bag, and 8 Hajar, who could probably take Tsunoda's place, because you can see that Tsunoda not even in the top 10. 9 Bortoleto, 10 Lawson, but for a sprint you do not get points for these positions. So this is how it finished. Fastest lap going to Norris. Maybe that is the precursor of some of the things to come. And here is of course our 2025 drivers championship. So how it looks like. So we can see Oscar Piastri maintaining his lead with 241 points, and we have then Lando Norris being on 232 points. Big title fight. Max Verstappen made up a little bit, the reigning world champion, with 173 points. Next over here, we then have George Russell, so he stays 4th for Mercedes MG Petronas on 147 points, but Charles Leclerc 5th for Scuderia Ferrari, 124 points. And this is great. If Leclerc wins and Russell doesn't finish higher than 9th, Leclerc would jump to the 4th place. So that definitely has to be the focus, because McLaren is woefully off the pace, Mercedes is woefully off the pace over here. 6th, Lewis Hamilton for Scuderia Ferrari stays on 103 points. Then we have 7, Andrea Kimi Antonelli feeling that pressure. Is Verstappen coming to Mercedes? That's a big rumor going into the paddock. 63 points. Definitely the young teenager is feeling the pressure. That is clear. 8 is then Alexander Albon for Williams, 46 points. Obviously, they had a bit of an engine issue, so he didn't pick up any points there. 9 is then Nico Hülkenberg for Kick Sauber, 37 points. 10 is then Esteban Ocon for Haas, 27 points, thanks to obviously the 4 points that he picked up. Built a bit of a gap to 11 Isaac Hadjar for Racing Bulls, 22 points. 12 we then have Lance Stroll for Aston Martin, 20 points. 13 obviously is then Pierre Gasly leading Alpine, scoring all of their points with 19 points. Fernando Alonso is 14, as his race number suggests, 16 points. And the same goes for obviously 15 Carlos Sainz Williams, who also has 16 points, who did really well here in a sprint. Then we have another position, which of course is 16 for Liam Lawson, Racing Bulls, 12 points. 17 Yuki Tsunoda, Red Bull Racing. Well, we will see his ex-pass from the Racing Bulls, the ex-Ferrari strategist guy, obviously Lauren Mackies. We will see how he can help him to help Red Bull Racing get more points, but 10 points, that's a very poor return, because look, 18 Oliver Berman has right on his heels with 8 points. 19 is then Gabriel Bortoleto, Kick Sauber, 4 points. 28 Franco Colapinto for Alpine, 0 points. 21st Jack Doohan, Alpine, 0 points. Yeah, when you're fighting for the seed, obviously you won't be doing so well. So yeah, definitely you can see over here, you guys, for the Grand Prix, the focus will be to make up more ground, hopefully to these top 3, but especially to Russell, because Mercedes is struggling greatly here. For the 2025 Constructors' Championship, you can see McLaren leading the way with 473 points. Scuderia Ferrari with the cherry red of the 2025 season, we are on second on 227 points. Mercedes is then third on 210 points. So over here, obviously the aim will be to extend the gap to Mercedes, which should be pretty straightforward, and especially to hope that McLaren's hopefully in a race will have another coming together. That would be great, because that could open up, for example, a chance for us to maybe go for a victory. For the Red Bull Racing, looks like they will be staying there with 180 points. 5th Williams, 62 points. 7 Kick Sauber, 41 points. And 6 and 7 is Racing Bulls, 37 points. 8 Aston Martin, 36 points. 9 Haas. So despite scoring 6 points, they still 9 with 35 points. But look, only 1 point separating, obviously position 7 and 9, and only 6 points separating, position 6 and 9. That's a mighty fight there in the midfield, and 10 Alpine, 19 points. So this is how the constructors' table looks like. And yeah, overall, so this was the constructors' table, this was the drivers' table. And this is how the sprint finished. So yeah, a little bit anticlimax, I have to say. You could feel a lot of tension, I would say, in the air. Because clearly, people didn't want to make a mistake, right? People didn't want to, maybe fight it too hard. I mean, there are not so many, points on offer. But I believe, this exactly proved that the sprint should be taken more seriously by Formula One. So, for example, you could create that sprint championship, right? Where obviously Lewis Hamilton lost massive, ground. But if you would award, let's say, $1 million or $2 million, dollars, to the winner, to the drivers, giving them some proper trophy, not only having, for example, Thibaut Courtois, coming in and, give all of the kind of, not even, the sprint Grand Prix winner trophies, but, just giving kind of these memorable plates, that you get. I think it would be, better. Obviously, you could still count the words and should probably count the points towards the World Championship, but it would be good, just like you have it, for example, in other sports, like, in the football, for example, it's done really well, right? Because you have the cups, you have the league, so that you don't only fight for one championship, but you could be fighting for 2, and that could maybe help to spice it up, because I do believe that both McLarens could have made late lunches, could have tried very, very hard, but when the difference is only 1 point, obviously the Grand Prix matters much more, especially when you are fighting for a top position. So the Formula One should really take the sprint championship more seriously over here, because it is a joy, to see it again, in half an hour, lots of action. But I believe, the critical point over here, is to make it, kind of more valuable for the drivers. And if you become a sprint champion, right, nobody talks about the fact that Verstappen, for example, won 6 times more wins than obviously, the other drivers, in the list. Nobody has won more than 2 sprints apart from him. So, again, you can make more of a build-up, because the sprints are definitely here to stay. In Spa-Francorchamps, that was a really good good race, but again, you know, with little overtaking, and that could have been improved if obviously there is more to play for. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this third ever sprint reaction over here. Well, third ever, this I should say the third sprint reaction, obviously, you know, this season over here. Again, you know, let's see what happens now in the qualifying and the Grand Prix. You know, and again, if we can make close the gap a little bit, you know, especially in the qualifying, if we can make it, you know, very, very close to that magical, you know, 1 minute 40 seconds, that 100 seconds, nobody has come quicker around Spa-Francorchamps, I think we will be in within the hunt. And we can really start to challenge still for the titles here in the 2025 season, right? So everybody over here, this was your Smiling Sun Champion, giving you the reaction to the third sprint race of the weekend of the season from the round 13, the Belgian Grand Prix, run at the legendary Spa-Francorchamps circuit. Hope you enjoy it, and all I can say is, let's recharge and let's go for the Belgian Grand Prix win, right? You know, we were on that pole position with the Leclerc the past 2 years for various reasons, and also with Sainz in the ground effect era. We almost on that Grand Prix pole, so let's plant it there. Forza